Welcome to AI Scouted on Anfield Index Pro. I'm Dave Hendrick, joined as always by Mr. Karl Matchett. How are you, sir?
Still champion. What about yourself?
Yes, still champion. Very tired champion, but still a champion. This will be the last Scouted that I will be doing for a little while. I will be able to do solo pods, but pods with other people are going to be a bit of an issue for a little while as I get my new house set up and get internet service and all the like, because in Ireland nothing is ever easy. But I am going to endeavour to make something happen. I might even have to invest in a bit of short-term pay-as-you-go internet from one of our local providers, but we'll make something happen. But for today, Karl, you have been going through the Discord and you have found a question for us to do.
We have. We do have a bit of a backlog to get through because we've not been able to obviously get to the Discord questions through the season at some of the times. But Tim Ljung-Krantz asked us, love what you do. Hi guys, had a simple thing that I think would be interesting to get your thoughts on. Can you rank our 5 best and 5 worst signings of the last 10 years? So firstly, thanks for the question. And secondly, thanks for loving what we do. We actually immediately thought, oh God, have we even signed enough players? But actually, where this 10 years goes back to is a nice little cut-off point, isn't it?
It is, yes. So it includes the last summer of Brendan Rodgers, where bizarrely he was kept, having been embarrassed in his final 2 games of the 14-15 season. Crystal Palace beating us at home and Stevie G's last game at Anfield. And then obviously the horror show away to Stoke. The school of thought in recent years has become, look, Jurgen said, give me a few months and I'll come. So just stick with what you have for now. It doesn't really explain him being allowed to spend as much money as he was. But nonetheless, it does present a couple of players that can fit potentially into both lists here. And then obviously we have the entirety of the Jurgen Klopp era. And there aren't really any signings to categorise from the Arne Slot era so far, because Frimpong hasn't played yet. Wirtz and Kerkez are not yet signed. We'll talk about them later. And, I mean, are we really going to be mean to Federico Chiesa and include him on this list? I don't think we will. We did agree as well, Karl, that there were 3 players that were just too obvious for the best signings list, so we would exclude them for today.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. Otherwise, that side of the pod would have been pretty short. I don't think anyone will ever look at transfer fees and say, as a conclusion, Mohamed Salah was a waste of money. So that feels like just ignore that one, because it's obviously not just a good one, but a legendary purchase, pretty much a iconic player, and nothing could really have gone any more right with that than it did. And by the same token, although they were vastly more expensive, I think Alisson and Virgil van Dijk have to come in the same category. Obvious and easy, big wins. So let's not just take up 3 with 3 obvious ones.
Exactly. So we're going to remove them, and we're going to look at the other signings then that have been made by Liverpool from the summer of 2015 until now. And I suppose we have to factor in not only the impact of the player, but the deal that got them to Anfield to begin with. So, Mr. Matchett, are we doing this 1 to 5, or do we just want to throw out names and then rank them?
I mean, in the absence of having definitely decided my 5 on each side, I'm happy to go back in time, start at the beginning, discuss some options, and then announce our 5 at the end.
That's perfect. So let's go summer 2015. The signings are Joe Gomez, 3.5 million rising to 8 million. James Milner on a free. Danny Ings for 6.5 million. Adam Bogdan on a free. Some fella called Bobby Firmino from Hoffenheim. Nathaniel Klein, because Brendan Rodgers just could never get enough of Southampton mediocrity. Christian Benteke and Marco Grujic. He was signed in the January of 2016, the first signing of the Jurgen Klopp era. So it feels like Bobby is one to at least go on to the short list. Whether he makes the top 5 or not is up to, you know, how we land at the end. Joe Gomez, given the value, and we still have him 10 years later, potentially one that is worth consideration. Milner on a free, we paid him a big chunk of wages, but on a free, you know. It feels like they would be the three who would be worth consideration for a short list of a top 5 in terms of good. And Christian Benteke feels like one that deserves consideration for the short list of bad.
So when I said before that I hadn't finalised my absolute 5 on either side, I have finalised a couple of them. And I'm not going to lie, you've got one on each side here. Benteke, I think, is just an obvious one. I hated the signing. I hated the chase. I didn't want him at all in the team. And I can still remember very, very clearly the reason why. At this point, obviously we were trying to improve and we had had a really terrible end to the previous campaign, blah, blah, blah. But there were a few shining lights for us at the time, nonetheless. One of those was Philippe Coutinho. I didn't want anybody coming to the club, certainly not for big money, certainly not in prominent positions, who would obviously not gel with the style of play that Coutinho had. Because Coutinho was, like, at that point, he was starting to become like a much more regular goal scorer for us. He was a goal threat, but he was still creative number one as well. Now, how you got the most out of Coutinho in terms of his creativity was movement ahead of him off the ball. And what you don't get from Christian Benteke, I'm afraid, is any kind of movement whatsoever, let alone proactive movement.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when Villa signed him from Genk, he did a really good season. He started the next season really well, and then he joined Villa like right around deadline day. And he had a brilliant first year for them. 23 goals in 39 games. He was big, he was quick, he was powerful, he was a good finisher. And then he tore his Achilles. And his game changed pretty dramatically when he tore his Achilles. And he hadn't had as good a second season. He wasn't playing at the same level. But he tore his Achilles. And for players that had good pace, an Achilles tear can be, really, really troublesome. For a player of his size as well, an Achilles tear can be quite troublesome. So he comes back in the 24-25 season, and he just doesn't look right. And we both know Sam Tighe, you know him better than I do, but he's an Aston Villa fan. I remember talking to him about Benteke in that 14-15 season, and Sam saying he just doesn't look like the same player. Like, they say the burst is not there. He doesn't really move anymore. He just tends to lumber into one spot, and that's his spot. And if the ball doesn't come to him, he's not bothered. And yet that summer, Brendan Rodgers insisted that we sign him over alternatives that included Memphis Depay. Whether he would have worked out for us or not is anybody's guess. Heung-min Son, who I still maintain if he had joined us, he would be talked about among the best to ever play in this division. But Rodgers insisted on Benteke, and the way he did it was by threatening to use his veto to block the deal for Bobby Firmino. It was a horrible deal. We overpaid dramatically for a player coming off a mediocre season and a disappointing season the year before that. It didn't make sense. He clearly wasn't going to work with Phil. He wasn't the type of player that was going to work with Bobby either. And it didn't make sense because what we really needed was a Raheem Sterling replacement, because we sold Raheem that summer, which is why I think Son would have made so much more sense, because you could have seen Liverpool line up with Son on the right, Bobby is the 10, Phil on the left, obviously a lot of movement and interchange. And we still had Daniel Sturridge at the time, and we were bringing in Danny Ings. And you thought, oh, that's good enough. Like, that's enough going forward. Benteke didn't make sense to me. And like you, as soon as I read this question, I was like, well, Benteke is definitely in my 5 for worst signings.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, fee above everything else, to be perfectly honest. At the time, that was a huge, huge chunk for us. And like you say, the fact that we sold Sterling and paid out a good part of that money to bring in Benteke was dismal. And I think the most dismal part of it all is that the guy on the other side of that equation, if you like, in Roberto Firmino was actually slightly less money, if I remember correctly. And I mean, you can't compare impact because one had none. But I think Firmino was among the best signings we made during that period. Certainly one of the best players that we had across Klopp's tenure. My favourite player, to be honest, from that first team of Klopp. Yeah, brilliant. Took him a while, obviously, to settle in, but you know, he had long enough afterwards that we spoke about it. We don't need to go into too much detail of what he was. He was just fantastic and absolutely loved it.
Yeah, we can talk a bit more about him when we come to the end of this. Let's move into 16-17.
Can I just before we do ask you one question? It's probably not for this particular set of five, but at another club, would someone who you bought in, such as a Taiwo Awoniyi, for example, for barely anything, £1 million or so, didn't have any impact, and that you sold for a massive profit, would they be in your best purchases?
Oh, that's good. Look, because I often think of one of the names that came to mind for me in a similar vein was actually Solanke, who I think we paid $3 million for and got 21 million for. And I thought of Jordan Ibe as well, who we signed for 500 grand and got 15 million for. Like, we're doing this talking about buys, but the truth of it is that over the last 10 years or so, while we have bought extremely well, of course, I would argue we've actually sold a little bit better. When you think of, say, just as an example, Ryan Brewster, the fee we got for him. Who was the other kid we sold to Bournemouth for 6 million? Brad Smith.
Brad Smith.
Who we released, then re-signed, and then sold him for 6 million. And then within 6 months, he was heading out on loan. Kevin Stewart, we signed for nothing, and then basically swapped him for Andy Robertson. I think it was basically him and 3 million in add-ons for Andy Robertson. Like, I would say as a selling club, even the Benteke, we overpaid drastically, but we got most of our money back, despite the fact he was pretty disastrous for us. I think we got 27 million back out of the 32 we paid for him. So I would argue we've actually sold a notch above how we've bought, which is when you consider the names we're going to list of players we bought, I think it shows just how well run we've been for the last decade or so.
Yeah, I would agree, and I would even say that is quite evident when running through this decade of time that we've been handed, and the number of considerations or the names that we could at least discuss or could be in the conversation on the good or the top five is considerably longer on mine than it is on the bad five, let's say.
Oh, for sure.
The Reds, it's Jack here, and that was a clip from one of Anfield Index's audio podcasts. If you have enjoyed the video, make sure you do like, share and subscribe to keep up to date on all things LFC. We record around 100 audio podcasts every month, with our shows featuring match-going fans, top journalists, professional analysts and even Liverpool legends along the way, with the Great Dane himself, Jan Molby, joining us every single week. If you want to listen to all our podcasts for free, head over to anfieldindex.com/podcasts. Our audio shows are available wherever you get your podcasts. Just search Anfield Index. Or if you prefer to listen to all our podcasts in full and without any ads, why not head over to AI Pro today to check it out now at AnfieldIndexPro.com. If you want to get involved in the great growing community of Liverpool fans, check out the Anfield Index Discord. The link is in the description. Do get involved with that, from Reds around every corner of the globe. For now, Reds, hope you enjoyed this video.